Thunder Road, 1958. Thunder Road didn't just burn rubber, it tapped into a raw, underground energy that mainstream Hollywood rarely approached. Set in post-war Appalachia, the film follows Robert Mitchum as a veteran-turned moonshine runner dodging federal agents on back roads built for speed, not safety. The centerpiece? A souped-up 1957 Ford Fairlane 500, not the often misidentified 50 Ford Coupe. No CGI, no stunt doubles, just real cars, real roads, and real risk. Mitchum didn't just star in the film, he produced it through his own company, DRM Productions, and even wrote the haunting theme song. Many maintain that early stock car racers, many of whom had real ties to bootlegging, saw the film as more than fiction, a mirror of their own outlaw beginnings. Talk has long lingered that Thunder Road helped cement the rebellious streak that would come to define early NASCAR culture. While critics at the time gave it a cold shoulder, Southern audiences embraced it, giving rise to a cult status that still lingers in gearhead circles. Thunder Road wasn't polished, but that was the point. It was jagged, fast, and unapologetically on the fringe. The Flame and the Arrow. Released in 1950, The Flame and the Arrow turned heads for more than its Technicolor palette. Set in 12th century Lombardy, it cast Burt Lancaster as a rebel archer defying tyranny, but it was Lancaster's real-life circus roots that stole the spotlight. The actor famously performed his own stunts, including a rooftop backflip that left critics stunned and studio execs reportedly anxious. Word circulated that Warner Brothers insured Lancaster's acrobatics for an unusually large sum, fearing injury could derail production. Directed by Jacques Tourneur, better known for noir and horror, the film pivoted hard into athletic spectacle, offering a swashbuckler with bounce and bravado. It earned an Oscar nomination for Best Cinematography in packed theaters, yet it rarely makes modern action lists. It's been suggested that its blend of physical comedy and heroism foreshadowed later hits like The Mask of Zorro, even if unofficially. A box office triumph and a stylistic outlier, it endures as one of old Hollywood's most agile hidden gems. The Naked Jungle. In 1954, Charlton Heston took on what may be one of classic Hollywood's most bizarre threats. A marching army of carnivorous ants. The Naked Jungle, directed by Byron Haskin, best known at the time for The War of the Worlds, was a rare blend of psychological tension and jungle-set action, adapted from Carl Stevenson's short story Lining In vs. the Ants, first published in 1938. Heston plays a rigid plantation owner in the Amazon, whose life is disrupted by two forces: a mail-order bride portrayed with surprising depth by Eleanor Parker, and a swarming natural catastrophe. The film's climax, where fire, flood, and desperation converge, remains one of the most intense sequences of the decade. Off-camera, staging the ant invasion was a logistical nightmare, with a mix of practical effects, location shots, and studio trickery used to simulate the overwhelming threat. A few film scholars propose the movie's underwhelming box office was partly due to being eclipsed by Haskin's more heavily promoted sci-fi projects. Another camp attributes its unusual tone, a hybrid of pulp action and existential dread, as a reason it never found a mainstream audience. Still, it has quietly gained cult status over the years, with fans praising its ambition and eerie atmosphere. Whispers persisted that the film's ant sequences inspired later creature features, though no direct connections have been confirmed. As old Hollywood action films go, The Naked Jungle stands out for its willingness to gamble on something strange and nearly pull it off. The Crimson Pirate. In 1952, The Crimson Pirate exploded onto screens with a Technicolor flair that mocked tradition and embraced chaos. Burt Lancaster, a former circus acrobat, performed most of his own stunts, swinging from masts, fencing midair, and grinning through it all. The film tossed aside the stiff-lipped hero archetype and dove headfirst into slapstick-infused action, a bold move for an era still clinging to straight-laced swashbucklers. Director Robert C. Audmack, more often linked to noir thrillers, steered the film into uncharted waters, crafting a pirate saga that felt more like a live-action cartoon than a historical epic. European audiences couldn't get enough, turning it into a surprise overseas hit. In the United States, though, reactions were split. Some critics rolled their eyes at the broad humor, while others applauded genre-defying energy. Word circulated about its ban in Spain under Francisco Franco's regime, allegedly due to its rebellious undertones, a rare fate for a pirate caper. Decades later, critics point to its fingerprints on modern blockbusters like Pirates of the Caribbean, with their elaborate stunt work and cheeky anti-heroes. Some observers maintain that The Crimson Pirate helped lay the groundwork for the action-comedy hybrid, though it rarely gets the credit. Today, it lingers as a cult gem, loud, unorthodox, and proudly off-script. The Vikings. Released in 1958, The Vikings was old Hollywood's answer to the sanitized heroics of sword and sandal epics. Directed by Richard Fleischer and starring Kirk Douglas and Tony Curtis, the film leaned into raw physicality and brutal spectacle. Real longships were constructed and sailed through Norwegian waters, while hundreds of extras clashed in large-scale battle scenes that pushed production limits. Ernest Borgnine, cast as Douglas's father despite being just 1 year older, delivered a performance that somehow made the dynamic work. Composer Mario Nasimbeni's haunting score added operatic heft to the violence, giving the film a mythic cadence. Based on Edison Marshall's novel The Viking, the movie drew from Norse legend but didn't shy away from grit. A few proposed that his visceral style was a quiet rebellion against the polished historical dramas of the time. Other observers highlight off-camera friction between Douglas and Curtis that may have fueled the film's charged energy. Either way, The Vikings carved out a legacy as one of the most unflinching action adventures of its era, one that still flies under the radar for many classic film fans. The Train. By 1964, action films leaned heavily on spectacle, but The Train refused to play by the rules. Set during the final days of Nazi-occupied France, it centers on a French resistance fighter, played by Burt Lancaster, trying to stop a train carrying looted art from crossing into Germany. The story wasn't pulled from thin air. It drew loose inspiration from the real-life efforts of French art historian Rose Valland, who secretly tracked Nazi art thefts while working under the Vichy regime. Though Valland's name never appears in the film, her shadow looms large over its premise. Originally helmed by director Arthur Penn, the film took a sharp turn when Lancaster, also a producer, brought in John Frankenheimer just days into production. Certain cinema experts claim creative clashes over tone led to the switch. Frankenheimer stripped the gloss off the war genre, opting for black and white over color to emphasize realism. Color would have made it too pretty, he later said. Instead of miniatures or rear projection, the production used real locomotives, full-scale explosions, and working train yards, an unusually raw approach for the time. Lancaster, a former circus acrobat, performed most of his own stunts, including a dangerous run across a moving train. He slipped, tore a ligament in his knee, and limped through the rest of the shoot. Literally. The injury wasn't edited out. It stayed in the film, adding an unplanned layer of grit. Others maintain Lancaster's insistence on doing his own stunts was more than just commitment. It was ego, legacy, and maybe a bit of showmanship. While the film was a modest performer at the box office, critics took notice. French reviewers praised its cultural reverence, and American outlets described it as unusually cerebral for an action flick. One review dubbed it a thriller with a brain, a rare compliment for the genre at the time. Decades later, The Train still stands out. Not just for its explosive set pieces, but for daring to ask one of the genre's most provocative questions: is art worth dying for? The Heroes of Telmark. 1965's The Heroes of Telmark tackled one of World War II's most high-stakes covert missions, disrupting Nazi Germany's nuclear ambitions. Directed by Anthony Mann and fronted by Kirk Douglas and Richard Harris, the film dramatizes Operation Gunnerside, the real-life sabotage of Norway's Vemork heavy water plant on February 28, 1943. The target? A critical component in Hitler's atomic research. Norwegian resistance fighters, trained by Britain's Special Operations Executive, skied through brutal terrain to pull off what's now considered one of the war's most effective acts of sabotage. Filmed on location in the icy wilds of Norway, the production leaned into realism. Douglas reportedly insisted on performing several of his own stunts, including high-speed skiing sequences. Several film academics highlight its cerebral tone and focus on scientific stakes, not battlefield spectacle, as reasons it never reached the pop culture heights of The Great Escape. Yet others argue it was simply overshadowed by flashier contemporaries. Speculation still drifts that studio executives were uneasy about its emphasis on nuclear themes during the Cold War. Whatever the reason, The Heroes of Telmark remains a rare old Hollywood action film where the threat wasn't just military, it was existential. Gorgo. Gorgo stormed onto screens in 1961 with a roar that echoed across the Atlantic. Directed by Eugène Laurier, the film fused British sensibilities with Hollywood-style spectacle, delivering a monster movie that dared to flip the genre's usual script. Instead of ending in destruction, Gorgo offered an unexpected twist. The creature survives. Captured off the Irish coast and paraded through London like a sideshow act, the young sea monster becomes the center of mayhem when its massive mother arrives to reclaim it, flattening the city in the process. During production, speculation rose that MGM pushed for a more tragic ending, but Laurier insisted on a reunion, not a massacre. It has been suggested the film was a subtle jab at Cold War-era exploitation, with the monster symbolizing nature's backlash against human arrogance. Though often overshadowed by Japan's kaiju giants, Gorgo carved out its own cult following, thanks to its striking visuals, eerie underwater sequences, and a surprisingly emotional core. For fans of overlooked action gems from the Golden Age, this one stomps with purpose. The Secret of Convict Lake. Released in 1951, The Secret of Convict Lake delivers a tense, snowbound western with a psychological edge. Directed by Michael Gordon and distributed by 20th Century Fox, the film stands out for its stripped-down setting and unconventional power dynamics. Set in a remote Sierra Nevada outpost, the story follows a group of escaped convicts who descend upon a town inhabited only by women, an unusual setup for the time. Randolph Scott, a stalwart of classic westerns, plays Jim Canfield, a man on the run whose motives blur the line between vengeance and justice. The female lead, portrayed by Anne Dvorak, anchors the film's emotional tension. Unlike the damsel archetypes of the era, the women here hold their ground, literally and figuratively, against the male intruders. That reversal of roles was rare for the genre, especially in the early 50s. The film's visual starkness, shot in black and white, amplifies the isolation of its wintry backdrop. Off-camera chatter indicates the cast and crew battled real-life snowstorms during production, adding a layer of authenticity to the on-screen chill. While it didn't earn the spotlight enjoyed by contemporaries like High Noon or Shane, The Secret of Convict Lake carved out its own niche. A number of historians propose it helped push westerns toward grittier, more ethically layered territory, clearing a path for the revisionist wave of the late 60s. It may not have the name recognition of a John Ford epic, but for those digging into old Hollywood's lesser-known action gems, this one still hits hard. Bojest. Released in 1939, Bojest brought old Hollywood action to the desert with a strange blend of honor, mystery, and military spectacle. Directed by William A. Wellman, already known for the high-octane World War I epic Wings, this version reimagined the silent-era classic with sharper tension and a grittier tone. Gary Cooper leads as Michael Bojest, a British aristocrat who joins the French Foreign Legion with his adoptive brothers, played by Ray Milland and Robert Preston. Their bond drives the film, but it's the eerie visuals that stick. The most talked about image? A remote Saharan fortress manned by the dead, fallen legionnaires propped up to fake a defense. The shot, adapted from the 1926 silent version and P.C. Ren's original novel, became an enduring cinematic symbol of sacrifice and illusion. Film historians often cite it as one of the earliest examples of death as a psychological weapon on screen, rather than just a narrative endpoint. Production took place in California's Imperial Valley and Yuma, Arizona, where the crew contended with real desert heat to approximate North Africa. The fortress was constructed from scratch, requiring weeks of labor and a small army of extras. Some suspect the decision to shoot domestically was less about convenience and more about the growing instability in Europe as World War II loomed. Others suggest Paramount was hedging financial risks by avoiding overseas travel altogether. Despite its critical and commercial success at the time, Bojest has largely slipped through the cracks of modern action film retrospectives. It rarely lands on contemporary must-watch lists, yet its fingerprints are evident in later military dramas, from the Brotherhood themes to the visual language of Honor Under Siege. For fans exploring forgotten old Hollywood action, Bojest stands as a fortress worth rediscovering. Five Graves to Cairo. Five Graves to Cairo hit theaters in 1943, deep in the heart of World War II, and it wastes no time. Directed by Billy Wilder, better known for sharp-edged comedies like The Apartment, this wartime thriller leans into espionage with a lean, suspense-driven pace. The story follows a British corporal, played by Franchot Tone, who survives a desert ambush and hides in a remote Egyptian hotel, by assuming the identity of a dead Nazi spy. His mission? To uncover Field Marshal Rommel's secret plan, coded as the Five Graves, before the Axis advances across North Africa. Erich von Stroheim, once dubbed the man you love to hate during his silent film directing days, delivers a chillingly composed performance as Rommel. Some critics claimed his portrayal brought an unsettling calm to the screen, with the New York Times noting his icy and exacting control. Anne Baxter also stands out as Mouche, a French chambermaid caught between survival and sabotage. Despite its modest budget, the film crafted a convincing desert war zone almost entirely on Paramount's backlot. Production designer Hans Dreyer worked with lighting tricks and recycled sets to simulate the North African heat. That resourcefulness earned the film 2 Academy Award nominations, Best Cinematography and Best Art Direction. Though often overshadowed by Wilder's later hits, certain film experts maintain this may be his most overlooked gem. A few even speculate that Wilder's wartime experiences shaped the film's grim tone and unrelenting tension. And while it's not packed with explosions, Five Graves to Cairo proves that old Hollywood could deliver action through stakes, strategy, and suspense alone. Hell Drivers. Hell Drivers, released in 1957, didn't come out of Hollywood, but it still packed more grit than many American action films of its time. Directed by Cy Enfield, a filmmaker blacklisted during the McCarthy era, the film channels a kind of defiance that critics later linked to its raw tone. Stanley Baker leads as Tom Yateley, an ex-con thrown into the brutal world of high-speed gravel hauling, where truckers risk their lives daily for higher pay. It's a simple setup, but the stakes are anything but. Shot on actual British roads, the film's action scenes feel dangerously real. Baker reportedly performed some of his own stunts, adding to the stripped-down intensity. A young Sean Connery appears in a minor role, years before stepping into Bond's tuxedo, but already hinting at the physical presence that would define his career. While it never broke into the mainstream, Hell Drivers built a lasting cult reputation. Numerous observers think it quietly influenced the evolution of action cinema, with its no-frills style echoing through later films like The French Connection and Mad Max. Legends even tease that Enfield used the film to take a not-so-subtle jab at the Hollywood system that cast him out. Whether that's true or not, one thing's clear. Hell Drivers wasn't just ahead of its time, it was barreling straight through it. Tarzan's Greatest Adventure. Tarzan's Greatest Adventure, released in 1959, took a sharp turn from the vine-swinging formula audience had come to expect. Directed by John Guillermin, who would later direct The Towering Inferno, it stripped the franchise of fantasy and leaned into hard-edged realism. Gordon Scott, in his 5th time playing Tarzan, offered a portrayal defined by physical presence over dialogue, a shift that gave the film a grittier tone. The plot follows Tarzan as he tracks a gang of diamond thieves through unforgiving terrain, with a young Sean Connery, just years before his breakout as James Bond, playing one of the villains. Shot on location in Kenya, the film's rugged visuals and tense pacing lent it the feel of a war thriller more than a jungle adventure. Fistfights were brutal, the stakes felt genuine, and the moral lines were blurred. Critics at the time were split, but later retrospectives have praised its bold tone and stripped-down style. Many believe its darker themes made it a tough sell for audiences expecting pulp escapism. Others point to studio hesitation around its more adult-oriented approach. Either way, it endures as one of the most daring and overlooked action films of old Hollywood's golden years. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.